Welcome back. Look, if you're totally exhausted from memorizing massive vocabulary lists, stressing over grammar rules, and staring at tense tables just hoping to speak English confidently, well, you are in the exact right place. Today's explainer is breaking down a totally new approach to fluency, and it's backed by some seriously fascinating linguistic research. We're going to ditch those 500-word vocab lists and replace them with a targeted blueprint built around just 9 core verbs. Yep, only 9. By the time we wrap up, you'll know exactly which verbs fluent speakers use constantly and, more importantly, how to use them to build a daily practice worksheet that will absolutely transform your spoken English.
But before we get to the worksheet, we got to talk about the fluency freeze. You know exactly what I mean, right? You're in the middle of a sentence, the idea is perfectly clear in your head, and then bam, you freeze. Why does that happen? Well, it's because your brain is searching. It's furiously scanning for the right words, double-checking the grammar, picking a tense, and then trying to build the sentence from scratch. That's 4 distinct steps. It takes, maybe 2 seconds too long, and by the time you're finally ready to speak, the conversation has already moved on. Fluent speakers, they don't do this at all. They retrieve. They use a one-step process to instantly pull a ready-made piece of language. 0 construction required.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the fluency freeze, then cover action and change verbs, move into experience and placement verbs, and finally, build out your 9-verb practice worksheet. All right, section 1, the fluency freeze, and why we actually get stuck. Let's look at a super relatable, slightly embarrassing situation that nails exactly what this freeze looks like. Imagine someone asks you a question, and you have to reply with either, "I did a mistake," or "I made a mistake." And you're just standing there for 10 agonizing seconds, wheels turning, thinking, wait, which one is it? You finally panic and guess, "I did a mistake," which, is completely wrong. But this perfectly proves why we desperately need to stop building sentences from scratch. When you're gluing language together word by word on the spot, you are practically guaranteed to freeze and stumble. And this brings us to the absolute magic of chunks. So what is a chunk? It's simply a ready-made piece of language. It's already built, it's waiting there, stored in your brain as one single unit. When you store these 9 core verbs in combinations as chunks, you just reach for them, and your English flows naturally. There's no evaluating, no panic translating, and absolutely no freezing.
Moving on to section 2, let's look at action and change verbs, basically the engines of the English language.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how focusing on these verbs instantly stops you from translating in your head. Take make and do. These are probably the most confused pair in English, mostly because in a lot of languages, they translate to the exact same word. But look at their specific jobs. Make is all about outcomes and creation. When you use make, you're bringing something new into existence. You produce a decision, so you make a decision. You create forward momentum, so you make progress. Do, on the flip side, is strictly about activities and executing. You're just performing a task. You do research, or you do a favor. You aren't creating something brand new, you're just carrying out an action. Next up, let's contrast take and get. Take is your verb for deliberate, intentional choices. When you take a break, you are consciously choosing to stop working. When you take notes, you're making the choice to write things down. It's purposeful, right? Get, however, is entirely about a change or a shift in a state of being. Things are moving from one condition to another. You're improving, so you get better. You're beginning a task, so you get started. And here is why this is such a game changer. It's the sheer power of these tiny words, especially get. Did you know researchers estimate that the verb get alone appears in over 400 different combinations in English? Let that sink in.
400 different everyday situations covered by one single verb, just by knowing how to use it in chunks. So instead of torturing yourself trying to memorize 400 unique vocabulary words, you really just need to master the combinations of get.
All right, Section 3, Experience and Placement Verbs. This covers have, give, put, set, and go. Most people think the verb have is purely about possession, right? Like, I have a car or I have a house. Actually, forget possession. It turns out have is really the verb of shared experience. You don't possess a conversation, you experience it with someone else, which is exactly why we say have a conversation or have a look. Give, meanwhile, is all about your interaction and your contribution to someone else. You're contributing your thoughts when you give feedback, or you're offering an opportunity when you give a chance.
The last three verbs in our blueprint are put, set, and go. Now, these three are incredibly common, and yeah, they get confused all the time. But look at their distinct jobs. Put is for placing or positioning something, and that can be physical or conceptual, like you might put off a meeting to next week or put things in perspective. Set, on the other hand, is for establishing conditions or creating a foundation. You set a date or set clear goals. And finally, go is all about movement and direction. You move through topics when you go over details, or, well, things move in a bad direction when they go wrong.
To see how powerful this is, let's look at how they work together in real life. Think about a standard business meeting. Before it starts, you set the agenda. You establish it. During the meeting, you go over the points. You move through them. And then after the meeting, you put together a plan. You place the pieces together. That's three verbs doing three completely different jobs, carrying the entire process of a complex meeting. Which brings us to Section 4, your 9-verb practice worksheet, your new daily system.
Because look, just knowing about these chunks logically, that's not enough. We need a solid framework to actually make them yours. So here is the exact 3-step system you're going to use on your daily worksheet before you ever step foot into a real conversation. It's simple. Spot it, store it, and speak it.
Step 1 is spot it. You basically have to become a hunter, actively looking for these chunks out in the wild. When you're watching a movie, listening to a podcast, or just overhearing people talk, don't just listen for isolated vocabulary words you don't know. Instead, listen for combinations that you recognize but maybe haven't quite mastered using yourself yet. So when you hear someone casually say, "Hey, let's go over the details," you stop and recognize it. Boom, that's a chunk. You spotted it.
Step 2 is store it. When you go to write this newly spotted chunk down on your practice worksheet, the formatting is absolutely crucial. You have to write it out as one single unbroken unit. Please, whatever you do, do not write go over and details as separate words. Write go over the details all together as one piece. Why? Because your brain physically needs to store it and retrieve it as a single, instantly accessible piece of language.
And step 3 is speak it. This is where the real magic happens with this worksheet. You have to physically speak the chunk out loud in advance. Think about the conversations you know for a fact you're going to have tomorrow, whether it's at work, at a coffee shop, or just hanging out with friends. Look at the chunks on your worksheet and practice them out loud today. You are literally training your mouth's muscle memory to know the words before your brain even has to search for them.
When you actually apply this worksheet method, the results are frankly incredible. Just imagine a quick, everyday conversation between two colleagues planning out their week. In just one brief, totally natural Monday morning chat, they could easily use 17 different chunks derived entirely from our 9 core verbs. They'd throw around phrases like, "Did you get a chance?" "We're making progress," "Can you take care of?" and "Let's have a coffee." and they flow through that conversation effortlessly because they aren't building sentences from scratch, they're just seamlessly retrieving chunks. So here is the huge takeaway from this entire explainer. You already know these 9 words. You've known make, do, get, and have for years and years. But mastering their combinations on your daily worksheet, that is the true secret key to unlocking fluent, gap-free speech. Every single time you spot, store, and speak a chunk, that is one less thing your brain has to try and construct on the spot.
I want to leave you with a direct challenge today. Grab a piece of paper right now, start your 9-verb practice worksheet, and ask yourself this. What is the very first chunk you are going to spot, store, and speak today?